In AI, your greatest ally can be your most dangerous predator. The public story is simple. OpenAI builds the world's smartest models, and NVIDIA builds the world's fastest chips. It's presented as a perfect symbiosis, the engine of the AI revolution. But what if that story is a mask? What if it's a carefully constructed narrative, hiding a corporate Trojan horse, designed to keep OpenAI permanently dependent? According to some analysts, NVIDIA isn't just a partner. It's a predator in disguise, executing a quiet, four-pronged strategy to maintain control. We're going to break down that strategy, and I promise to reveal the one four-letter word that explains it all. We'll come back to that in a moment. In plain English, NVIDIA doesn't just sell GPUs, it sells dependency. This strategy reportedly culminated in a $100 billion deal that wasn't a deal at all, and it's the key to understanding the rising tension between these two giants, where partnership beginning to look a lot more like leverage. In the last chapter, we uncovered a dangerous codependency, a fragile truce between the king and the kingmaker. We saw how OpenAI, the world's most famous AI lab, was held hostage by its hardware supplier, NVIDIA. But we left a critical question unanswered. How did one company build a cage so perfect that even the giants couldn't escape? It all comes down to a single, four-letter word. That word is CUDA. And it's the most brilliant Trojan horse in tech history. On the surface, CUDA is just a piece of software. It stands for Compute Unified Device Architecture, and it's a programming model that lets developers talk directly to NVIDIA's GPUs. Think of it as a special language that unlocks the raw, parallel processing power hidden inside those chips. Before CUDA, this was a dark art, a complex task reserved for a handful of specialists. NVIDIA changed the game by making it easy. They gave researchers and developers a simple, powerful tool, and they gave it away for free. As a result, an entire generation of AI pioneers built their dreams on this foundation. From university labs to tech startups, CUDA became the default language for high-performance computing. It was the fastest, the most documented, and the most supported. Why would you build anywhere else? This is where the open hand of partnership slowly closes into a fist. Building on CUDA, like being offered a piece of land to build your dream home, but with one non-negotiable condition: all the plumbing, all the wiring, and every single screw must come from one exclusive supplier, forever. You can design the most beautiful house, but you're locked into their ecosystem. Want to switch to a cheaper, more innovative supplier for your windows? Too bad, their screws don't fit your wiring. You'd have to tear down the walls. This is vendor lock-in, and NVIDIA didn't just stumble into it, they engineered it. Therefore, the trap isn't just the hardware, it's the code. Every AI model, from the simplest algorithm to a behemoth like GPT-4, is built on thousands of lines of code. Much of that code contains kernels, tiny, hyper-optimized programs written in CUDA that tell the GPUs exactly how to crunch the numbers. These kernels are the secret sauce. They are the difference between a model that runs in hours versus one that takes weeks. When a company like OpenAI spends years and billions of dollars optimizing its entire software stack for NVIDIA GPUs, that investment becomes a concrete wall. To switch to a competitor's chip, even a hypothetically cheaper or faster one from AMD or Intel, isn't just a matter of swapping out hardware. It means rewriting everything, every custom kernel, every data pipeline, every single library that their researchers have spent a decade mastering. It's a monumental task, a self-inflicted wound that no company moving at the speed of AI can afford. The switching cost isn't just measured in dollars. It's measured in years of lost progress. This is the cage. Now let's pull back and translate this into real-world consequences. This isn't just a technical problem for engineers. When one company controls the foundational layer of an entire industry, they control the price. NVIDIA can, and reportedly does, charge enormous premiums for its AI chips, not just because they are good, but because their customers have no viable alternative. The CUDA moat drowns competition before it can even learn to swim. This slows down innovation, as promising new hardware startups struggle to gain a foothold. They can build a better engine, but NVIDIA owns all the roads. And as a result, the dream of a decentralized, democratized AI future gives way to a reality where only the giants who can afford NVIDIA's toll can compete. For a while, this was the entire story, a story of brilliant strategy, market capture, and an inescapable software trap. We've been so focused on the software, we missed the next layer of the prison being built. Hold that thought, because the real bottleneck isn't just inside the chip anymore. It's between them. As AI models grew exponentially larger, a single GPU was no longer enough. Not even 8 in a server. Companies like OpenAI needed to connect thousands, then tens of thousands of GPUs together into a single, colossal brain. And here, NVIDIA deployed its second masterstroke, the interconnect. This is the nervous system of an AI supercomputer, the ultra-high-speed networking that allows all those GPUs to communicate as one cohesive unit. NVIDIA's solution is called NVLink and InfiniBand. These are not just cables. They are proprietary, hyper-optimized technologies designed to make a cluster of NVIDIA GPUs run with breathtaking efficiency. If CUDA was the language that let you talk to the chip, NVLink is the telepathy that lets the chips talk to each other. When you build a data center with tens of thousands of GPUs, the efficiency of this interconnect is everything. A 5% improvement in networking performance can mean saving millions of dollars in training costs and shaving months off development time. And who makes the best, most integrated interconnect for NVIDIA GPUs? NVIDIA, of course. Therefore, the cage just got bigger. Now, it's not just about rewriting your software. It's about re-architecting your entire data center. OpenAI reportedly learned this the hard way. While building their massive supercomputers, they faced extreme challenges in getting thousands of GPUs to work together efficiently. Delays and performance issues plagued their efforts, highlighting that even with unlimited capital, scaling is a brutal problem. Their stack, from the lowest level kernel to the highest level networking fabric, was built on NVIDIA's turf. Every problem required NVIDIA's tools, NVIDIA's engineers, and ultimately, NVIDIA's permission. This brings us to a crucial point in our story. By this stage, you are no longer a customer. You are a dependent. You don't just buy chips. You buy an entire ecosystem. You rely on their proprietary software, their proprietary hardware, and their proprietary networking. Every layer of the stack is another bar on the cage. Freedom is no longer a technical choice. It's a fantasy. And if you're finding this breakdown valuable, take a second to subscribe. We don't run ads. We just follow the story wherever it leads. And your support makes that possible. So the trap is set. The gatekeeper is in place. But NVIDIA's strategy doesn't end with simply locking in its biggest customers. The most dangerous phase comes next. To maintain control, you can't just imprison the king. You have to ensure no other kingdom can rise to challenge you. You have to keep the entire landscape at a state of managed chaos. Analysts now suggest that NVIDIA is executing a classic arming the rebels strategy. It's not enough to have OpenAI dependent on you. To ensure their permanent reliance, you must also prop up their rivals. According to reports, NVIDIA has invested in or supplied crucial GPU access to nearly every major competitor to OpenAI. They've poured resources into companies like Cohere, Adept, and most notably, Anthropic, OpenAI's fiercest ideological and commercial rival. They're also the primary supplier for CoreWeave, the cloud provider that powers many of these challengers. In plain English, NVIDIA is funding and equipping the very companies trying to take OpenAI's crown. This isn't about picking a winner. It's about ensuring the war never ends. By fueling the competition, NVIDIA guarantees that OpenAI never slow down, never pause to re-architect its systems, and never risk the costly, time-consuming escape from the CUDA cage. They are permanently at war, and the only one selling the bullets is NVIDIA. This transforms the relationship from a partnership into something far more sinister. It's leverage, maintained by a carefully orchestrated conflict. But what happens when the rebels you are become powerful enough to challenge, not just your key customer, but you? Now let's pull back the curtain on the final act. In the last two parts, we mapped the battlefield. We showed how NVIDIA built a four-walled prison around OpenAI and every other AI lab, using hardware, software, and financial pressure to lock them in. But the real genius of this strategy isn't just building the trap. It's making sure no one inside gets strong enough to break the walls. Because if one lab becomes a monopoly, they can dictate terms. They can negotiate prices. They can even build their own chips. Therefore, NVIDIA's real goal isn't to pick a winner. It's to ensure their asterisk is asterisk no winner. This is the art of arming the rebels. NVIDIA's strategy looks like support, but it's a masterclass in divide and conquer. They aren't just selling shovels to every gold miner. They are actively funding new miners to enter the race, ensuring the gold rush never ends and the demand for shovels never stops. Look at the money trail. Public filings and press releases show NVIDIA has become a prolific venture capitalist. They invested a reported $100 million into CoreWeave, a specialized cloud provider that directly competes with the big three, Amazon, Google, and Microsoft. Why? Because CoreWeave runs exclusively on NVIDIA GPUs. By funding CoreWeave, NVIDIA created a new, loyal, and massive customer for its hardware, while simultaneously putting pressure on the giants who might one day build their own chips. But the real masterstroke is their investments in AI labs themselves. While OpenAI was buying tens of thousands of H100s, NVIDIA was quietly writing checks to its biggest rivals. According to reports, they participated in funding rounds for Anthropic, the creators of Claude. They invested in Cohere, another leading foundation model company. They backed Mistral AI in Europe. They even invested in Inflection AI, later acquired by Microsoft. This isn't about picking a favorite. It's a portfolio strategy designed for perpetual conflict. Each investment creates another hungry competitor, another lab desperate for more GPUs, another player in the great AI war. The logic is brutally simple. They sell the shovels to everyone, then use the profits to finance the next wave of shovel buyers. This strategy gives NVIDIA two monumental advantages. First, it's the ultimate risk diversification. It doesn't matter if OpenAI, Anthropic, or a yet unknown startup from Paris builds the first true artificial general intelligence. Whoever gets there, they will have gotten there by riding a wave of NVIDIA GPUs. Either way, NVIDIA gets paid. The house always wins because the house is funding every player at the table. Second, and far more important, it guarantees control through conflict. Constant, ferocious competition forces every AI lab into a desperate arms race. Their research budgets become GPU budgets. Their strategic roadmaps are dictated by the H100 shipping schedule. This endless war for computational power leaves them with less capital, less time, and less focus to pursue the one thing that could truly set them free: building their own independent hardware. The more they fight each other, the more dependent they all become on their shared arms dealer. Hold that thought, because the design of this conflict is critical. So, what does this invisible war mean for the rest of us? For the developers, the businesses, and the everyday users of AI? At first, it looks like a good thing. More competition means more innovation, right? We get better chatbots, more powerful image generators, and faster breakthroughs. But this is a managed conflict, not a free market. The pace of innovation isn't set by pure scientific curiosity. It's set by NVIDIA's product release cycle. New, more powerful models often require the next generation of GPUs, which are, of course, sold by NVIDIA. Prices for AI services remain high because the underlying cost, the computational horsepower, is controlled by a single supplier. As a result, we end up with the illusion of choice. We can pick between a dozen different AI models, but they are all built on the same foundation, running on the same hardware, and indirectly paying fealty to the same king. The power isn't being distributed. It's being consolidated one layer beneath what we can see. This is where the Trojan Horse, once a gift, begins to reveal its true purpose. We can now see the trap in its entirety. It's not one single tactic, but a four-pronged cage, each wall reinforcing the others. The first wall is the financial squeeze. AI is astronomically expensive, and NVIDIA controls the single biggest cost. By setting the price of GPUs, they effectively set the price of admission for building frontier AI. This keeps the circle of competitors small and ensures that even the most well-funded labs are in a constant state of financial precarity, burning billions just to stay in the game. The second wall is strategic uncertainty. By arming every rival, NVIDIA ensures that no lab can ever feel secure. OpenAI be the leader today, but they know NVIDIA is funding the very companies trying to be funded. This forces them to run faster, spend more, and take bigger risks, deepening their reliance on the very company that's fueling their competition. They are trapped on a treadmill that's speeding up, and the power switch is in Jensen Huang's hand. The third wall is the one we've known all along, CUDA, the software moat. After years of building their entire software stack on NVIDIA's platform, switching is not just a technical challenge, it's an existential one. It would mean rewriting years of code, retraining entire teams, and sacrificing performance at the very moment they're in a fight for their lives. The cost of leaving is designed to be higher than the cost of staying. And finally, the fourth wall, the one we've just uncovered, funding the opposition. This is the most insidious part of the trap. It reframes NVIDIA not as a supplier, but as the architect of the entire ecosystem. They are not just a player in the game, they are the game itself. They've created a coliseum where the gladiators fight for glory, while the emperor profits from every battle, ensuring no single gladiator ever becomes popular enough to challenge his rule. If this analysis has helped you see the bigger picture, the hidden strategy behind the headlines, then take a moment to subscribe. Our work is to connect these dots, and your support makes that possible. This four-walled prison, the financial squeeze, the strategic uncertainty, the CUDA lock-in, and the funding of rivals is now fully assembled. The Trojan Horse is no longer at the gates. It's inside the city walls. Its purpose was never to help one side win the war. Its purpose was to ensure the war never ends. So the question is no longer asterisk if asterisk OpenAI in a trap. The question is, can they get out? What happens when a company becomes so powerful it controls the destiny of an entire technological revolution? This is where the story escalates beyond corporate strategy. This is where the regulators start paying attention. And this is where we find OpenAI's desperate, last-ditch escape routes. Because they know they're trapped. And they have a plan. So what happens next? Who really owns the road to the future? And what does the final battle for its control look like? Last time, we uncovered how NVIDIA's CUDA software became the invisible prison for AI development, a system so good it made everyone dependent. We saw how this wasn't just about selling chips, but about controlling the very language of artificial intelligence. It was never a fair fight. It was a carefully constructed trap. But that was the setup. So what happens next? This is where the consequences become impossible to ignore. The problem isn't just a rivalry between two tech giants. It's a battle for the future of intelligence itself. Because when one company controls both the hardware and the software that powers AI, they control the pace, the price, and the direction of all progress. In plain English, if NVIDIA holds all the keys, building the next generation of AI will become incredibly expensive and slow for everyone else. This creates a dangerous dynamic. For a company like OpenAI, whose entire mission is to build artificial general intelligence, this dependency isn't just a business problem, it's an existential threat. They are effectively paying a tax to their biggest potential competitor every time they train a new model. Therefore, the real story now is about escape. It's about the desperate, high-stakes search for a way out of NVIDIA's golden cage. But the smartest traps don't look like traps. They look like the only logical choice. And breaking free is a labyrinth of impossible decisions. OpenAI's first option is the most ambitious: build their own custom AI chips. This is the path Google took with its TPUs and Amazon with its Trainium silicon. The logic is simple. If you can design a chip perfectly tailored to your own AI models, you can achieve massive performance gains and slash your long-term costs. In theory, you escape the NVIDIA tax by building your own highway. But theory is clean, reality is messy. Building state-of-the-art silicon is one of the most difficult and capital-intensive endeavors on the planet. It requires billions in upfront investment just to get started. It demands hiring armies of the world's most sought-after chip architects, many of whom already work for NVIDIA. According to reports, Sam Altman has been exploring this path, seeking astronomical sums of funding from sovereign wealth funds to stand up a new semiconductor venture. The risks are staggering. Even if you secure the funding and the talent, you still have to contend with the brutal physics of manufacturing at the nanometer scale. A single design flaw can set you back years and burn through billions. Then you face the final boss, TSMC, the Taiwanese foundry that is the gatekeeper to advanced chip production. You are now competing with Apple, AMD, and NVIDIA itself for precious, limited manufacturing capacity. A delay at the foundry could derail your entire AI roadmap. As a result, building your own chips isn't just an escape route. It's a bet the company gamble that could take the better part of a decade to pay off, if it pays off at all. So what about the second route? If you can't build, maybe you can switch. The most obvious alternative is AMD, NVIDIA's long-standing rival, which has been aggressively marketing its own Instinct series of AI accelerators. Intel is also in the game with its Gaudi chips. On paper, these competitors offer a lifeline away to diversify suppliers and regain some bargaining power. But switching isn't like swapping one brand of coffee for another. It's like trying to change the engine of a jumbo jet while it's in mid-flight. The problem, once again, is CUDA. Over the last 15 years, OpenAI and the entire AI have built their whole world on top of NVIDIA's software, their most critical code, the low-level kernels that dictate how calculations are performed, the intricate libraries optimized for specific tasks, the complex inference pipelines that serve models to millions of users, is all written in CUDA. Switching to an AMD or Intel chip means rewriting everything. It's a painstaking process of translation, optimization, and validation. Engineers who have spent their entire careers mastering NVIDIA's ecosystem would have to be retrained from the ground up. You do face immediate and significant performance regressions as your software is no longer perfectly tuned to the hardware. Things would break, reliability would suffer. It's not just a technical headache. It's a massive drain on your most valuable resource, the time and focus of your best engineers, pulling them away from building new AI models to simply rebuild the plumbing. The cost of migration, in terms of both money and lost momentum, can be so high that it makes staying in the cage seem like the lesser of two evils. In other words, the switching cost isn't a line item on a budget. It's a gravitational force that keeps the entire industry locked in NVIDIA's orbit. This leads to the third path, which is less an escape and more a resignation. Just rely on the cloud. Companies like Microsoft, Google, and Amazon buy NVIDIA's chips by the tens of thousands and rent them out. For OpenAI, this is their current reality, thanks to their deep partnership with Microsoft Azure. It offers convenience and scale without the colossal upfront cost of building their own data centers. But this convenience is an illusion of freedom. The cloud providers are NVIDIA's biggest customers. They are still paying the NVIDIA tax. They just pass that cost, plus a tidy margin, on to their clients like OpenAI. It's a hidden dependency. one layer removed. You're no longer paying NVIDIA directly, but your bill to Microsoft is inflated by the cost of the very chips you're trying to escape. Therefore, relying on the cloud doesn't solve the core problem of centralization. It simply shifts the dependency from the chipmaker to the cloud provider, who is themselves dependent on the chipmaker. You're still trapped, just in a slightly larger, more comfortable cell. Finally, there is the fourth option, the idealistic route, push for open standards. This is the dream of a world beyond CUDA, a common software language that would allow AI models to run on any company's hardware. Projects like OpenAI and Triton are attempts to build this universal translator. The goal is to commoditize the software layer so that chip makers are forced to compete purely on the performance and price of their hardware. It's a beautiful idea in theory. In practice, it's excruciatingly slow. Getting fierce competitors like NVIDIA, AMD, Intel, and Google to agree on a single standard is a monumental political challenge. Each company has an incentive to subtly tilt the standard in a way that favors its own architecture. NVIDIA, in particular, has little motivation to help build the very system that would dismantle its greatest strategic advantage. As a result, progress on open standards is often bogged down in committees, moving at a glacial pace while the frontier of AI research sprints ahead. It's a noble long-term solution, but it offers little relief for the immediate, burning problem. Now, a skeptic might raise a fair point. Isn't NVIDIA just winning because they build the best product? And for a long time, that has been unequivocally true. Their hardware and software have consistently outperformed the competition. But this argument misses the bigger picture. The issue isn't NVIDIA's intent. It's the market structure their success has created. When a single company's choices dictate the trajectory of a technology as important as AI, their incentives matter more than their intentions. Their incentive is to protect their market position, which may not always align with the world's incentive to foster broad, affordable, and rapid innovation. Another counter-argument is that competition will eventually solve the problem. Just wait. The thinking goes, AMD or some new startup will catch up, but this ignores the powerful physics of lock-in. The immense switching costs and the network effects of CUDA act as a powerful brake on market forces. Competition is not a magical cure when the playing field is tilted this heavily. It's a slow, arduous crawl, and in the fast-moving world of AI, a few years of delay can feel like an eternity. This is what elevates the stakes from a corporate chess match to a question of societal importance. We are moving toward a future where a single private company will become the de facto gatekeeper for progress in artificial intelligence. They could indirectly decide which companies, which research labs, and even which nations get to build at the frontier. This isn't just about the price of a GPU. It's about who has the power to shape a technology that could redefine the global economy and the very nature of human work. The system is working exactly as it was designed. But the question is it a design we can afford to live with? Hold that thought. Because this concentration of power has not gone unnoticed. As the true nature of this dependency becomes clear, a new, powerful player is stepping onto the board, one with the authority to rewrite the rules of the entire game, the regulator. The battle for the future of AI is about to enter its most unpredictable and volatile phase. The final question is no longer just about chips and code. It's about power. Who really owns the road to the future? So far, we've unpacked NVIDIA's four-pronged strategy: the hardware moat, the software lock-in, the venture fund that doubles as a sales channel, and the cloud platform that makes them the landlord of AI. But this isn't just about one company's brilliant execution. The Trojan Horse we've been discussing isn't about a single deal or a clever product launch. It's about a quiet, systematic takeover of the entire AI supply chain, from the silicon atom all the way up to the API call. Here's the part that should make you uncomfortable. When a single company becomes the unavoidable infrastructure for an entire technological revolution, Markets stop behaving like markets. They become permission systems. Therefore, the most important question isn't who has the smartest AI model, or which startup will build the next killer app. It's who gets to decide what is possible, and what gets delayed, priced out, or never even built. Now let us talk about the only force that can meaningfully challenge a gatekeeper of this magnitude: regulators. When one company's hardware and software become the default railroad for progress, it inevitably triggers scrutiny. We see three major regulatory philosophies emerging globally. In the United States, the focus is often on antitrust and consumer harm. Regulators ask, does this company's dominance stifle competition, inflate prices, or limit consumer choice? The EU, on the other hand, takes a more market-shaping approach. Through policies like the AI Act and the Digital Markets Act, they are less concerned with punishing past behavior and more focused on proactively defining the rules of the road to ensure fairness and prevent gatekeepers from forming in the first place. And then there's China, which views technological infrastructure through the lens of national sovereignty and strategic autonomy. For them, reliance on a single foreign entity for critical AI infrastructure is a geopolitical vulnerability to be mitigated at all costs. But regulators are not a silver bullet. And this is a crucial breathing point. Investigations, especially complex, technology-focused antitrust cases, are painfully slow. They can take years, even a decade, to resolve. By the time a ruling is handed down, the market may have already been permanently reshaped. Technology moves at the speed of light. Policy moves at the speed of bureaucracy. As a result, regulators can't easily unwind a deeply embedded software ecosystem, CUDA, or force a company to open source, its most valuable intellectual property. Their power lies in blocking future mergers, imposing fines, and mandating behavioral changes, like forcing more transparent access or preventing a company from bundling products to crush smaller rivals. They are a powerful, but blunt and slow-moving, instrument. So, where does this leave us, given what regulators can and cannot do? The future of AI infrastructure seems to be heading toward one of three possible scenarios. The first, and most likely in the short term, is the status quo. In this future, NVIDIA's platform control deepens. CUDA becomes even more entrenched. New hardware generations further widen the performance gap, and the DGX cloud becomes the default, high-margin environment for any serious AI development. For developers and businesses, this means AI remains powerful, but expensive and highly centralized. The cost of entry for new foundation model startups stays astronomically high, reinforcing the dominance of the existing, well-funded players who can afford to pay NVIDIA's toll. Innovation happens, but it happens on NVIDIA's terms, within their walled garden. And the fundamental question of who owns the roads never gets answered. The second scenario is a breakout. This is the future the rest of the industry is desperately trying to build. In this world, alternative ecosystems, driven by companies like AMD, Intel, and a new wave of specialized AI chip startups, finally begin to mature. Open-source software layers like Triton or OpenAI gain enough traction to make the underlying hardware matter less. It wouldn't be a sudden revolution, but a slow, grinding process of diversification. We'd see a partial escape from vendor lock-in, where a startup could train a model on one type of hardware and run inference on another without a massive engineering effort. This decentralization would introduce price competition and lower the barrier to entry. However, this is a slow and uncertain path. It requires coordinated, multi-year efforts from a fractured group of competitors, all while NVIDIA continues to innovate at a blistering pace. It's a possible escape, but it's far from guaranteed. The third scenario is direct intervention. This is where the slow-moving gears of policy finally engage with force. It might not be a full-blown breakup, but rather targeted regulatory or standards-based action. Imagine a future where governments, recognizing AI structure, as a public utility, mandate interoperability standards. This would be a policy that forces hardware to be compatible with a common software layer, effectively neutralizing the CUDA modes without destroying NVIDIA's business. It would turn the GPU market into something more like the smartphone charger market, where the plug is standardized and companies must compete on the quality and price of their product, not on the exclusivity of their connector. This would fundamentally reduce the gatekeeping power and redistribute leverage across the ecosystem. And here we begin to see the shape of the trap. This isn't just an abstract corporate battle. It has direct consequences for everyone, from creators and small businesses to the next generation of builders. When one company controls the supply chain, they control the price. If the cost to train a cutting-edge model remains in the tens or hundreds of millions of dollars, only the largest corporations can participate at the frontier. This affects the services you use, the prices you pay, and the features that get developed. For a small startup with a brilliant idea, the question isn't just can we build it, it's can we afford the GPU rent to even try. This is about who gets a seat at the table. It determines whether the future of AI is built by many or leased from a few. The question of who owns the network is directly tied to the question of who gets to innovate. We've covered a lot of ground in this series, and if you found this breakdown valuable, consider subscribing. Our work is to cut through the noise and connect the dots on the tectonic shifts happening in technology, so you can understand not just what's happening, but why it matters. We don't do hype. We do analysis. So let's bring this all home. The Trojan Horse wasn't just a product. It was a four-pronged trap, executed flawlessly. First, the unparalleled hardware, creating a performance gap no one could cross. Second, the CUDA software moat, turning a hardware advantage into a decade-long ecosystem lock-in. Third, the venture capital arm, which transformed potential competitors and customers into a captive sales channel. And finally, the cloud platform, positioning NVIDIA to become the ultimate landlord, renting out the very infrastructure it monopolized. Each piece reinforces the others, creating a feedback loop that centralizes power and extracts value at every layer of the AI stack. It was a strategy designed not just to win a market, but to become the market. And now, for a final breathing point. Take a step back from the quarterly earnings, the keynote announcements, and the breathless headlines. The story of technology has always been a cycle of centralization and decentralization. From the mainframe to the personal computer, from AOL's walled garden to the open web. We are now deep in a new cycle of centralization, where the computational power to shape our digital and physical world is concentrated in the hands of a very small number of companies. This brings us to the final, critical question, the one that will define the next decade of innovation. Is the future of artificial intelligence going to be shaped by the labs that build the models, or by the company that owns the road?